Gestalt theory comes out of the 1920s. A group of German psychologists were studying how people view objects, especially individual components of objects. And really what they found was that there were certain ways that people see individual elements as a unified whole. That phrase, unified whole, is exactly the definition of the word Gestalt, and it's all about why some designs work. There are 6 principles of Gestalt theory, and it is really critical that you know them. They are similarity, closure, continuation, proximity, figure to ground, and symmetry. We're going to go through those individually, and we'll start with similarity. If you look at this design, the sort of dual Statue of Liberty, you'll see that it's made out of many triangles. None are touching. They all just are put together, but they're put together in a way that they're close enough and the viewer is able to pull together the image of the Statue of Liberty. Because this design is made up of all these similar things, for the viewer it becomes really a whole object, not a collection of triangles. And this is sort of kind of exactly what we're looking for when we're talking about Gestalt theory. We see similarity in other styles. In this case, the 3 cubes, one which is larger, has these slight curves on the ends and points. It sort of make it a little different. Because this element is different, it breaks this pattern of similarity, and it brings our eye to focus on that individual center. We still see the 3 cubes as a combined unit, but the center one pulls us to that position. Here's an album from the Beatles, A Hard Day's Night, and you'll see that the design is made up of 20 portraits of one of the band members, and one in the center, or as close to the center as possible, is fully blacked out. That's called an anomaly. It is a break in this pattern of similarity. And that also, just like that previous slide, draws the viewer's attention right to the center. We see this sort of pleasing collection of portraits as one unified piece, but this anomaly sort of jars our attention a little, so that we're not just glossing over this, but we're actually seeing one thing slightly wrong with the design, but also something that brings our attention right to the center. Continuation is a way of designing so that the eye sees a continuous line. These separate elements, these letters, S-P-A-C-E, and the star, are all drawn together by this line as though the star is arcing through this word. It ties everything together. Without that line, we'd have the word space with a star, but adding that line, removing that white and that type, kind of gives us this unified glide through that pulls it together. Here's another example of continuation. We have 4 separate lines that all happen to meet at one point. For the viewer, though, what they're seeing are 2 lines that just intersect, almost as though 2 pieces of string have been laid on top of one another. That's the idea of continuation, that because these lines glide right through, we don't see them broken apart, but instead we see them as continuous and as a unit. And again, that brings us in. Closure is the design style that uses the viewer's eye to sort of finish the design, to close the shape. In this case, we see a panda as part of the World Wildlife Fund's logo. In reality, a panda has not been created here by the designer, but by the audience. The designer has made these black shapes that come together, but never actually closed the back or the head of the panda, never really filled in the eyes. They're leaving it to our imagination and our sense of closure, that we like to see things unified just as a natural sort of thing. And that gives us the whole shape of the panda. Proximity is another principle of design. In this case, you see the collection of cubes on the left. Because they are not very close to each other, they're separate, the distances are rather different and scattered, we don't see that collection on the left as a unified whole. But the group of cubes on the right very much is unified, and we see almost a Rubik's Cube style, or a single square made up of these 9 individual mini squares. That is proximity. So when things are close together and in a shape that tends to work, we will see them as a unified whole. When they're not, just like on the left, we see this broken pattern. Here's another example of proximity. This is a logo from a bank. And these 3 sort of mini yellow curves or waves together become the head of a torch. These 3 curves give the appearance of this single unified design. We're also seeing some of the use of similarity in this, just like in the last slide. But what counts here is proximity. Because these are close together, we see one unified shape. Figure to ground is complex, but actually sort of easy when you think about it, especially as video producers and photographers. We often try to separate our subject from the background. We do that by shooting with depth or shallow depth of field. In this case, you may see 2 things. One may be a goblet, and it's a white goblet against a black background. And the other may be 2 faces, 2 black faces against a white background. There just happens to be the shape of a goblet between them. We have a tendency to see foreground and background as different elements, and designers can use that to their advantage, especially when working with dark and light shapes or colors, so that in this case they can create something that really engages the viewer and forces them to interact, even have conversation about what they're truly seeing. We see the same approach in this illustration by Escher. We start at the bottom with these very detailed fish that seem to lose their detail as they go up higher. And then we wonder if they were actually really fish, because now we see a flock of ducks. If you look at this from the top down, the same thing. You see ducks that seem to fall apart in a school of fish. That works because we're using light and dark shading, and we're using the theory of figure to ground, knowing that our viewer will focus on the foreground and separately on the background. And in doing that, we can have them see different things. Finally, symmetry may be a simple one, but it is a very important one. We tend to want to see things balanced and whole, put together. This color wheel, if this was missing a quadrant or missing sections here and there, the viewer may wind up looking at this and wondering where they are or what is missing, rather than seeing a unified wheel, a true logo. They would wind up seeing this sort of mixed collection of pieces. We like to see things in order and balanced, and when they're not, it can be very distracting. So as you think about your design, think about where is there symmetry. In many of the previous slides, you saw that, just in different ways. The cubes, for example, had a symmetrical approach to them. So that's the last of the principles of the Gestalt theory. I hope this is helpful. Please run through this more than once. Take some notes, use the handout, visit the website. Be prepared to take a quiz on the principles, the Gestalt theory, the principles of design here, and definitely find ways to work them into your own production work. Thanks.